opposition for 5.5 years. They have refused to even think about using their constitutional muscle, which they're given by the framers, particularly the power of the purse.
Obligated, I might add.
Yes, it's a major obligation of Congress to police the president, just like the president. If you had a runaway Congress, the president would be obligated to do something about that. That was the system that the framers gave us. And you know, the other thing about that, Andrew, that's important to remember is you don't get to vote present. You know, if you're in a position where it's your obligation to police the other side, you don't get to sit idly by. You are either stopping the problem or you're part of the problem. And they've become part of the problem and have been for 5.5 years.
Do you think, I mean, I don't know where it began, probably long before I was born, long before you were born. We started to accept this sort of discretion within the Oval Office, within Congress, certainly on the Supreme Court, and considering international law. It is not a discretion to check and balance. It is the law. Congress must check the president. The judiciary must check laws to make sure they are constitutional. That is not a discretionary power.
No, it's our governing framework, and if someone abdicates from it, then the framework doesn't work, and what you end up with is tyranny because, and this is why I wrote the book, the framers understood that if too much power gets accumulated in one branch and that destroys the separation of powers is what protects our liberties. And when too much power gets concentrated in one actor, you have tyranny, and that's essentially what we have.
Isn't it kind of insane that the president would literally sign the National Defense Authorization Act, that he signed into law accepting this provision that he would have to inform Congress, or at least the House Armed Services Committee, or maybe the Intelligence Committee, that somebody was being transferred off of Guantanamo Bay, and then less than a year later just violates it? I mean, we're not talking about some obscure constitutional provision. This is something that the ink is still wet on.
Yeah, well, you know, look, he issued a signing statement at the time he signed the Defense Authorization Act, complaining that these restrictions on his ability to transfer people out were unconstitutional restrictions on his commander-in-chief powers. And he actually has a point there, because traditionally in our law... Well, yeah, of course. No, look, I'm with you. I think if the president objects to a piece of legislation, he ought to veto it, and we should stop having these 3,000-page bills where, you know, you're basically signing into law all kinds of stuff that you don't think is constitutional. But you know, Obama does what he does to get through today, and he, you know, signed that because that's what he thought he should do at the time. Carney said, as you played in that clip, that they were, of course, going to consult with Congress and that it was a matter of federal law. But when push came to shove, we now know that if they had complied with the 30-day rule, this would never have happened. The swap would never have happened, because there would have been such a swell of public and congressional opposition that it would have been scotched. My point is, the 30-day thing is like the shiny object in the debate that everybody's attention is riveted to. What happened here is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States, under circumstances where the Taliban is still conducting offensive operations against our people in the field. Yeah, the war's not over. Right? Certainly no one's told the Taliban it's over, because they're still conducting terrorist operations. He's given them back 5 of their top commanders under circumstances where they're still trying to kill Americans. That is about as astonishing a dereliction of duty as you can imagine in the Commander-in-Chief. And I think it's a good bit more important than the 30-day notice requirement.